There is a certain kind of silence that only exists on a military post before dawn, a silence that feels earned, a silence that hums with discipline and memory. 3:14 in the morning inside a barracks lounge is not peaceful the way civilians imagine. It is fluorescent lights that do not blink, a vending machine that hums like it has secrets, boots drying by a radiator, a coffee pot that tastes like metal and resolve the ache in your shoulders from armor you are not wearing, but feel anyway because you have worn it long enough for your bones to remember. I sat alone on a steel cot that night, fatigue nibbling at the edges of my focus uniform. Neat boots still laced because sleep in a place like this is something you visit rather than inhabit. Fort Liberty in October carries a chill that sneaks under the collar and settles in your ribs. Leaves scrape across the concrete like whispers, and the American flag outside snaps against the pole with the stubborn pride only this country manages to give a piece of cloth. I had been on shift for hours, a stack of reports beside me, a cup of coffee gone lukewarm in my hands when my phone vibrated against the metal cot frame. The sound cut through the stillness like a round cracking against steel. The name glowing on the screen made my breath stop for a heartbeat. Maddie. My daughter, 19 years old, my baby and not a baby all at once. No one calls at that hour with good news. Instinct sharpened faster than fear. I answered, and at first there was only breath sharp and uneven, the kind someone tries to steady when they are fighting not to fall apart. Then her voice came through a soft tremble soaked in panic. "Mom, I am at the MP station. I did not do anything. Please, come." The world tilted around me, though my body did not move. I stood anyway, by muscle memory, by something deeper, because when your child sounds like that, the universe narrows to a single point. A new voice followed hers, clipped and official. Someone who sounded like he had practiced authority more than lived it. "Staff Sergeant Hayes, there was an incident at base housing. Your daughter and her stepfather. He is reporting she struck him. He is claiming self-defense." My jaw pressed tight until my teeth ached. Self-defense. My daughter shaking and crying in the background. A grown man making accusations. Years in uniform teach you to hold steady under pressure, to keep your voice calm, even when your pulse jumps like it wants to climb out of your throat. I asked if she was hurt. The MP paused. "She appears distressed." Distressed. A soft word for a hard truth. I grabbed my Capkeys ID. My boots hit the floor with a rhythm that did not feel like walking so much as advancing. Outside, the air slapped cold against my face, sharp enough to wake nerves I did not know were tired. The post slept in rows of dark windows and quiet hums, security lights casting long shadows across the pavement. I crossed the lot, fast breath visible in quick bursts, each step fueled by a single thought that did not require language. Protect her. The truck door slammed, engine-roared tires gripped asphalt like they knew urgency. Streetlights flickered across the windshield as I sped past the motor pool supply buildings, the chapel bell tower silhouetted against a fading moon, the places where I had spent years learning how to be steady for others. In this uniform, I defend my country. But that night, I was preparing to defend my child. Maddie once painted cardboard stars for my barracks wall when I returned from deployment, said she wanted me to have a sky even when I was far from home. I remembered her laughing the first time she parallel parked my truck, how proud she looked in that moment. That same girl was now sitting under harsh lights being questioned while a man who promised to love her family told a story designed to break her. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. I had stood in places where the ground trembled and radios crackled with fear, where danger wore camouflage, and dust clung to skin like regret. None of that compared to the cold fire rising in my chest now, the kind of fire that does not burn wild but burns clean, controlled, focused, the kind I learned to carry as a soldier and the kind I was born with as a mother. By the time I reached the MP station, my pulse had settled into something almost calm, not peaceful, not gentle, the calm of someone who has already decided they will not lose. Someone had underestimated the wrong woman. And if you are a parent watching this, tell me in the comments where you are from and how far you would go to protect your child. I was not born into the military, but somewhere around my 21st birthday, when the world still felt too big and my future felt too narrow, I walked into a recruiting office and found a path that made sense. I enlisted after watching planes hit towers on a television in a break room at the diner where I waited tables. I remember the way strangers cried together, the way people held doors open and stood a little straighter and talked about duty in voices that shook. Some people ran toward comfort. I ran toward purpose. Basic training stripped me down to raw nerve and rebuilt me into someone who could run farther, think sharper, and endure what I once thought was impossible. I learned how to follow orders and how to stand my ground. I learned that discipline can be mercy in hard moments and that strength is quieter than most people think. 17 years have passed since then. I have deployed more times than my daughter has fingers on one hand. I have stood in sandstorms that turned sky to copper and marched through forests where rain fell like a judgment. I have watched soldiers crack under pressure and watched others rise higher than they believed they could. I have come home to yellow ribbons tied around trees and to empty driveways where no one waited because Maddie was still too young to understand time zones and reunions and why Mom left again. I missed first days of school piano recitals, braces appointments, and college tours. I missed long stretches of ordinary days that other parents sometimes take for granted. I did not miss them because I wanted to. I missed them because I believed serving made life better for her. That belief never wavered, but guilt settled in my ribs like a quiet roommate always present, even on good days. I raised Maddie as a single mother for years, juggling field exercises with bedtime stories, promotion boards with parent-teacher conferences. There were nights I tucked her into bed, then sat at the kitchen table shining my boots while she slept, telling myself that if I worked hard enough and stayed honorable enough, the world would return the favor and keep her safe. That is the hope of every parent, whether in uniform or not. Life taught me that hope is not a guarantee, only a compass. When Maddie was 17, I remarried. His name was Brian Keller, a civilian contractor who worked occasionally on post and spoke the language of uniforms even though he no longer wore one. We met through mutual friends at a holiday gathering. He seemed steady, polite, patient in a way that felt like calm rather than control. He asked about my service without treating me like an anomaly. He listened when I talked about Maddie, about deployments, about the tightrope between mother and soldier that never slackens. At first, it felt like relief, like maybe I could finally lower my shoulders and let someone else watch a corner of life for me. Maddie did not resist him at first. She was polite, curious, hopeful in that teen kind of way where you want good things to be true. They cooked dinner together once, both laughing about a burnt pan of garlic bread that smoked up the kitchen. There were movie nights and grocery store trips where they wandered aisles arguing over cereal brands like an ordinary family. Ordinary felt like a luxury. Ordinary felt earned. Looking back, the first cracks were so subtle they might have been mistaken for quirks. Brian commented once on Maddie's skirt being too short for a base chapel event. Another time, he suggested she check in more often if she stayed late at practice. He phrased it as caring. I heard it as protective. Maddie brushed it off. It felt harmless. People have opinions. Families adjust. Then came the comment about her friends being a bad influence, followed by reminders about curfews that grew stricter without conversation. He said he wanted structure. He said it was good for a young adult. Structure is something I know well. The Army taught me that structure builds confidence and keeps soldiers breathing. But there is a difference between structure and control, a difference between guidance and surveillance. I noticed the difference only when Maddie flinched at raised voices in a movie scene one night. It was small enough that someone else might have missed it, but mothers are trained by life to watch for micro-shifts, the tiny tremors that hint at storms. I asked her later if everything was all right. She nodded too fast, eyes darting like she was searching for the safest version of the truth. I let it go that night because she smiled and I wanted to believe her. Sometimes belief is hope in disguise. Sometimes it is fear avoiding a name. When Brian and I argued, it was never loud. He was a quieter kind of insistent pressing points like pins into a map. He did not yell. He questioned. Why did Maddie need so much independence? Why was she not more grateful for structure? Why did I always side with her? I told myself he meant well. I told myself families take time to blend. I told myself I had spent years leading troops and maybe I needed to relearn leading at home. Then came deployments and training rotations that pulled me away again. I left with an uneasy feeling I could not shake, like a piece of gear you are sure you packed but cannot picture in your ruck. Each call home felt slightly strained. Maddie sounded tired sometimes. Other times, she sounded overly cheerful, like she was performing normal instead of living it. I asked if things were fine. She always said yes. But once, just once, her voice wavered and she said it is easier when you are here. When I asked what she meant, she changed the subject and laughed about her art class. I wanted to push. I also wanted to believe everything was okay because the world already held enough battles and I was tired of waging all of them alone. So I believed the surface. Because sometimes a soldier learns to triage pain and chooses the wound that looks least life-threatening. Now looking back, I see all the signs lined up like marching formation. I see the long pauses, the shrinking circle of friends, the way she started texting me goodnight earlier as though trying to end her day before something began. But at the time, I saw a daughter transitioning to adulthood and a husband trying to be involved and a life that looked stable on paper. You can be a trained observer of human behavior and still miss the quiet breaking inside your own home. You can defend a flag with every cell in your body and still not see danger wearing a familiar face. If you have ever trusted someone because you wanted the world to be gentle for your child, tell me yes or no in the comments. There is a moment in every unraveling when hindsight sharpens into a blade you never asked to hold when tiny memories line up and point in one direction, and you wonder how long the truth sat in plain sight, waiting for you to stop looking away. The shift in our home did not come with slammed doors or shouted words. It came in careful questions that sounded protective on the surface and settled heavy underneath. It came in comments like, maybe she should not wear that top to the commissary, or are you sure those girls in her text messages are a good influence, or I just worry she does not respect boundaries. I used to see those sentences as concern, a man trying to play a role he had stepped into late, a household adjusting to new gravity, but concern should feel like warmth, not surveillance. And in time, the warmth cooled. Maddie's laughter changed, first, not gone, but thinner, like she measured each sound before letting it go. She used to burst into the kitchen humming songs from whatever playlist she was obsessed with hair, messy from sleep barefoot on tile, asking if we had eggs or cereal or if she could borrow my hoodie even though she already had 3 of her own. That brightness dimmed, slowly replaced by politeness so precise it felt practiced, like she had become a guest in her own life. I asked once if something was wrong, and she shrugged the kind of shrug people use when the truth feels dangerous and denial feels safer. I wanted to believe her smile. Want is a powerful blinder. Brian was subtle, always subtle, never raising his voice, never slamming doors, never giving obvious permission for alarm. He favored disappointment over anger, silence over confrontation, the quiet control that makes you doubt your instincts before you doubt his motives. He called it accountability. He called it guidance. He reminded her that the world was dangerous and girls needed to be careful, and she was lucky to have someone looking out for her. That is how control disguises itself wearing the language of protection while slowly rearranging your boundaries until you cannot remember where freedom used to be. I would catch small moments that unsettled me. Once I saw Maddie hover near the hallway, listening before walking into the living room as if checking the air before breathing it. Another time, I found her sitting in her car in the driveway long after she had arrived home, hands still on the steering wheel, staring at nothing, like she was gathering courage just to walk through a door. I asked why she waited. She said she liked finishing her music. It sounded plausible. It also sounded like a shield. In Army life, we monitor soldiers for signs of stress, subtle shifts that hint at deeper strain, and I knew those signs well. But the battlefield inside a home looks different, shaped by quiet corridors and whispered caution instead of loud commands and marching cadence. One evening, Brian suggested Maddie check in every time she left campus. He said young women were vulnerable, that routine communication was smart, that safety required structure. He said it in front of me with a tone that implied reason, and Maddie agreed so quickly my chest tightened. Compliance that fast rarely comes from comfort. I remember him telling her that people sometimes manipulate parents by acting sweet around them and rebellious when they are gone. It sounded at first like a warning about teenage behavior. Later, I realized it was a seed planted to make me distrust my own daughter, like he was scouting emotional terrain the way a person scouts exits in a room. When we did have family dinners, conversation shifted. She asked fewer questions. She spoke less. Her eyes checked him before landing on me. It was not fear exactly. It was caution, the kind someone uses when learning the rules of a game they did not choose to play. Once, when I hugged her goodnight, she stiffened just slightly, then relaxed. I asked if she was tired. She said yes. She always said yes. Even her yes sounded like surrender. Meanwhile, Brian framed everything as responsibility, commendable discipline, the kind of oversight a father figure provides. When he corrected her tone, he smiled while doing it. When he pointed out her mistakes, he used a calm voice that made her feel unreasonable if she flinched. That is the art of control. You reshape reality so the person questioning you wonders if they misunderstood, if they overreacted, if the issue is them. I know because I have seen it play out in troops under poor leadership, and yet in my own home, I hesitated to call it what it was. I had a rank and a reputation built on discipline. I knew how to give orders, and I knew how to de-escalate volatile situations. But this was not a battlefield with clear lines. This was family. Family can confuse even seasoned soldiers. And somewhere in me, I still clung to the belief that adults ought to get second chances, that homes could learn new rhythms, that trust could be earned. I had lived enough life to know better. I had also lived enough life to wish for gentleness for my child. When training kept me on post overnight, she texted me, "I love you more than usual." That should have been a clue. Love spoken too often can be reassurance disguised as fear. The night before everything broke, she sent me a message as I packed my ruck for a short exercise. It said, "Be safe. Love you." Nothing unusual, except she added, "It is easier when you are here." I stared at that line longer than I should have. The thought flickered that maybe she felt protected by my presence in a way she did not when I was gone. But wanting normal can drown out warning. So I kissed her forehead, told her to rest well, and promised I would call after formation. She smiled, and the smile had edges. If you have ever looked back and realized a moment was not ordinary after all, that your instincts whispered and you silenced them because hope felt easier than fear, leave a yes or a no in the comments. The week everything cracked did not announce itself with thunder. It arrived quietly, the way frost creeps across a window in thin silvery threads you only notice when the light hits just right. I had been scheduled for a short field exercise, not a deployment, not even a long rotation, just a handful of days in the woods, training younger soldiers on land navigation and communications under stress. Normally, I enjoy those assignments. They remind me of why I enlisted in the first place, of crisp mornings with breath hanging in the air, of compass needles steady as conviction, of students squinting at contour lines, like the earth had given them a secret code. I remember loading my rucksack in the garage, Maddie leaning against the doorway, hair pulled up, holding a mug of tea, like it was a shield of warmth against the early October chill. She asked how long I would be gone. "Just 4 days," I told her, nothing dramatic. She nodded, smiled, and told me to be safe. That part was routine. What was not routine was the pause afterward, the way her eyes shifted toward the living room where Brian sat scrolling his phone, and how her voice dropped when she added, "It is always easier when you are here." I asked if everything was okay. She said yes in that soft, too careful tone that did not match the words. I did not push. I wish I had. The first day in the field passed as they always do. Briefs, march, coordinates, radios crackling with interference, soldiers grumbling about cold rations and damp socks. My mind stayed on task, but in the quieter moments, Maddie's expression flickered across my thoughts like a ghost image on an old monitor. At chow time, I checked my phone. Nothing from her which was normal. She was an adult, not a child waiting for bedtime stories anymore. That night, under a sky sharp with stars, I texted goodnight and love you. She replied almost instantly, "Love you too. Sleep well." The next day, her reply took longer. Half a day went by, and when my phone finally buzzed during a short break, her message was short. Busy. Fine. Love you. Fine is a chameleon word. Fine means smooth sailing, or it means turbulence beneath the surface. Fine is the word people use when they do not feel safe explaining further. Still, I told myself she was busy with schoolwork, with friends, with the life she was building. I told myself not to read too deeply. The field can play tricks on your mind, making silence louder than it is. On the third day, I checked my phone again as soldiers reviewed grid coordinates. Still nothing. No good morning, no how was training, no random meme she normally would send. I stared at my screen long enough for Private Carter to ask if I was reviewing a satellite map. I forced a laugh and pocketed the device. Hours passed. The woods smelled of pine and earth radios hissed. Soldiers joked the world felt ordinary. Then my phone vibrated with a single message that sliced through my thoughts like a blade drawn in moonlight. Mom, he is worse when you are gone. 5 words. Simple. Soft. Terrifying. I read them 3 times, each time feeling something in my chest tighten. I stepped away from the group hands, steady out of habit, even as my stomach dropped. I called her. No answer. Texted. No reply. The quiet on the other end felt heavier than any ruck I had ever carried. Training kept moving. I kept moving with it because leadership does not halt, because your heart stumbled. But something in me had shifted a thread pulled out of place. At lunch, I called again. This time she answered, voice too bright, too quick, saying everything is fine, and the text was just stress, and she did not want me to worry. She sounded like she was performing calm. When I asked where she was, she hesitated just long enough to scrape against my instincts before saying in her room, working on homework. Brian's voice floated faintly in the background. Something about dinner. Something about checking curfew. She cut the call too fast. I stood in the shade of a pine tree holding my phone like a lifeline that had suddenly weakened. In uniform surrounded by soldiers, I felt helpless in a way I had not felt in years. That afternoon, I reached out to Family Readiness, the support network meant to help military families. I explained lightly at first, then more directly, that my daughter sounded off, that there had been tension at home, that I did not have concrete proof, but my instincts were prickling like antennae picking up static. The woman on the line spoke kindly, but with the polite detachment of someone who has heard too many worries to weigh them all deeply. Teenagers have moods, she said warmly. Blended families take time. Step-parents sometimes struggle to find boundaries. If anything were truly wrong, she would tell you. I wanted to believe her. I also wanted her to hear the urgency in my voice. I thanked her anyway. I hung up and stood staring at pine needles trembling in a light breeze, feeling the dissonance of a soldier trained to respond swiftly when lives are at stake, being told to wait and watch in the one place that mattered most. That evening, the temperature dropped. A wind rolled across the training grounds carrying the scent of coming rain and the muted clang of mess tent trays. Other NCOs laughed near a heater. I sat on a folding chair sharpening a pocket knife more out of nervous habit than necessity, the rhythm steady but my thoughts restless. Maddie still had not messaged again. I sent one more text. You good? She replied hours later. Yes. Busy. All okay. Have fun training. That phrase, have fun, felt like someone trying too hard to sound normal. Sleep that night came in short fragments. Each rustle of leaves, each coyote call from the tree line, each radio buzz pulled me half awake, like my nerves already knew the thread was fraying faster than I wanted to admit. By the 4th morning, I had stopped pretending my unease was imagination. I told the lieutenant I needed to cut out early due to a family concern. He nodded serious, no questions asked. Soldiers recognized that tone. Packed gear. Loaded the truck. The road, back to post, felt longer than usual, every mile marked by the hollow echo of that text. He is worse when you are gone. I kept picturing Maddie sitting in her room, pretending everything was normal, while tiptoeing around a storm she could not name out loud. I had spent my career teaching younger troops how to trust their instincts. Now, my own instincts rang like an alarm, but trusting instincts is not the same as arriving in time. The truth would not fully reveal itself until the call came in the middle of the night. In that final week before everything broke open, dread had already arrived, gentle at first, then steady, then undeniable, a quiet drumbeat in my bones, whispering, "Hurry, before the world takes away the chance to fix what you love most." I have lived through nights when the world felt razor thin, when adrenaline sat coiled beneath my ribs like a second heartbeat. But the night the call came did not begin with alarms or urgency. It began with paperwork and stale coffee and the steady hum of fluorescent lights that had buzzed overhead so long they felt like part of my bloodstream. End-of-shift quiet is a particular thing on post. Soldiers move slower, voices, softened boots drag just a little as fatigue settles in. Training reports sat stacked on the desk in front of me, signatures and timestamps, and the kind of administrative threads that hold the Army together even when chaos knocks on the door. My body hurt in familiar ways, the kind of ache that comes from days in the field, followed immediately by garrison duty. The kind you ignore because you have learned to. I had just finished reviewing the last incident log when I leaned back and let my eyes close for a moment. Not to sleep, to breathe, to reset. A hum from the vending machine filled the room like a mechanical sigh. Someone laughed faintly in the hallway. Boots clacked by in rhythm. Steady, practiced, secure. Safe. Or so it seemed. My phone lay face down beside the file stack screen dark. At 3:14 in the morning, screens should stay dark. Phones should rest. Mothers should rest. Children should sleep in warm beds without fear. The first vibration came as a small shiver across the metal desk. Then another, a sound too soft to be emergency, yet something inside me snapped awake before logic formed words. I flipped the phone over. Maddie. My hand froze mid-motion. No 18 or 19-year-old calls their mother in uniform at 3 in the morning without a reason that cuts bone deep. I answered before the second ring hit my ears. Breathing, sharp, uneven. I felt the hairs on my arms rise. Mom. Her voice sounded small. Maddie had not sounded small in years. Then the words came like stones dropped into cold water. I am at the MP station. The room tilted, even though I remained seated. My training tried to speak first, the part of me drilled to remain calm, to assess, to gather facts. But the part of me that carried her in my arms and walked floors with her at 2 in the morning as a colicky infant rose faster. A voice followed hers, official, and clipped the cadence of someone convinced protocol could soften truth. Staff Sergeant Hayes, there has been an altercation at base housing. Your daughter was involved. Her stepfather reported she struck him. He is claiming self-defense. Each phrase felt like it echoed twice once in my ears, and once somewhere far deeper, bouncing around the parts of me built from sacrifice and pride and the fragile conviction that home should be safer than any battlefield. I stood without realizing it, chair scraping across tile. The room suddenly too bright, the fluorescent bulbs slicing across my vision. My voice held steady out of instinct, not comfort. Is she hurt? I asked. The MP hesitated, which told me more than his answer. She appears distressed. Appears. Distressed. Language meant to sound neutral and landed like a blow. A muffled sob from Maddie cut through the line, and that sound reached places in me no uniform ever touched. I felt adrenaline crawl through my veins, hot and urgent, mingling with a cold dread that made my fingertips tingle. I grabbed my patrol cap ID keys. My boots hit the floor with purpose as I moved toward the door. The hallway stretched long and empty. Lights flickered overhead like nervous eyes. My mind split, one half soldier, one half mother. The soldier in me repeated training. Breathe, assess, stay calm. The mother repeated one word, go. Outside, the air hit sharp colder than it should have been for early October, carrying that faint metallic tang that coats the night before something breaks. The sky held a thin slice of moon like a blade, and the wind shifted leaves across pavement in dry whispers. I crossed the lot fast, each breath visible, each step louder than it should have been. My truck waited like a promise and a threat in the same breath. I unlocked it, slid inside, and the engine roared to life. Headlights carved through the dark, sweeping across the motor pool, the barracks windows lit here and there with insomnia and duty. I drove harder than protocol prefers, faster than calm. allows tires biting asphalt as the road out of the operations building unspooled ahead. The MP station was not far, 10 minutes at most. It felt like a lifetime compressed into inches. My hands gripped the wheel knuckles pale. The dashboard clock glowed 3:20. My pulse ticked louder than the engine. The world outside blurred. Street lamps streaked like ghosts across the windshield, each one a reminder of how many families slept peacefully while mine did not. A hum settled under my skin that charged stillness right before danger fully reveals itself. I have been trained to face uncertainty. I have stepped into unknown terrain with a calm heart. But nothing trains you for hearing your child's fear without seeing her face. Nothing prepares you for imagining her sitting under bright government lights with strangers judging her while a man you once trusted tells a story that paints innocence as threat. When I turned onto the road leading to the MP station, the building stood out against the night like a block of stubborn light windows glowing harsh and sterile. A flag lifted in the wind, stubborn, proud, silent witness to too many midnights like this for too many families. I killed the engine breath caught between inhale and exhale. For a moment, I sat still, letting training and instinct collide until they formed one steady line through my spine. I was not shaking. I was not calm. I was something else altogether. Something forged in years of service and years of motherhood. Something built to protect and endure and rise. The soldier in me prepared to follow procedure. The mother prepared to tear through doubt like barbed wire if anyone dared look at my child like she was guilty without listening. I opened the door and stepped into the night. The air tasted like metal and grit. Every nerve awake, every muscle ready. I had faced war zones with less fire in my chest than I carried walking toward that building. Mothers in uniform know two truths at once. We will obey the rules, and we will burn through them if our children bleed behind the lines they draw. That night, the rules and the fire walked beside me, one on each side, and no force on earth could have stopped me from getting to my daughter. The doors to the MP station slid open with that mechanical sigh that always reminded me of hospital rooms and airports, places where lives change in quiet hallways under fluorescent lights. Inside, the air felt colder than outside, chilled not just by conditioned air, but by a kind of procedural sterility. A young private sat behind the desk, posture straight, but eyes glazed the way beginners look when they think they understand authority but have never seen its weight. He glanced up when I approached, taking in my uniform, my rank, my face set tight as a drawn bowstring. His expression did not change. He asked for my ID. The way someone asks for proof of membership at a gym, standard, detached, unaware of the storm walking toward him. I handed it over. He scanned it, nodded once, then said, "She is in there." His tone was flat, almost bored. No softness, no empathy. He did not say your daughter. He did not say she is okay. He did not even look sorry. I reminded myself that not everyone knows how to see crisis until it is on their own doorstep. Still, something inside me bristled. That instinct mothers get when someone treats their child's pain like a routine intake on a quiet shift. I walked past him without waiting for permission. Down the hall, officers moved in slow rhythms, paperwork in hand, radios clipped to belts, the hum of comms in the background like distant bees. Farther in the holding area, sat lit by harsh white lights, every shadow flattened, every truth exposed. I saw Maddie before she saw me. Her hair pulled back in a rushed way, strands stuck to her face from tears. Her cheek-swollen skin flushed red along the jawline. One eye, puffy lip trembling just enough to betray her efforts to be strong. She sat on a plastic chair against the wall, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her body together. In that moment, there was no war zone I had ever walked through that felt as dangerous as the sight of my child in a government chair with pain mapped across her face. My heart kicked hard, a surge of heat and instinct and something primal that no rank can tame. Then I saw him, Brian, standing between two officers, hands on his hips like he was the one who had called for help, like he deserved sympathy. His shirt collar stretched a tiny tear near the button that looked like it had been pulled intentionally. A faint scratch on his forearm. A red mark near his neck. Nothing deep. Nothing severe. The kind of marks someone might make on themselves if they needed a story to match their lies. He wore the face of a man offended by inconvenience, eyebrows knit in practiced outrage, jaw clenched in righteous indignation. When he turned and saw me, surprise flickered for just a second. Then he masked it with a calm so smooth it could have been polished. "Laura," he said as though we were meeting in our kitchen, not in a place that smelled like metal and paperwork and fear. There was an incident. She lost control. My daughter's breath hitched. Not loud, but loud enough for me. A young MP corporal stood nearby, looking from Brian to Maddie with uncertainty, as if weighing the situation, not by truth, but by who spoke more confidently. I stepped forward, spine-straight voice, steady the way command boards teach you. "What happened?" I asked, but I looked only at Maddie. She opened her mouth, then closed it, her shoulders curled in. Her gaze went to the floor. Brian answered instead. "She got upset. She attacked me. I defended myself." His tone, steady, reasonable, carrying the cadence of someone used to being believed. I did not look at him. I looked at my daughter's hands. Slight tremor. Fingernails leaving tiny crescents in her palms. I crouched down beside her chair, ignoring the officer who shifted awkwardly as if unsure whether to intervene. "Maddie," I said softly, "talk to me." Her throat worked like swallowing words hurt more than speaking them. Her eyes lifted and met mine. Fear lived there, and shame that did not belong to her. "He said no one would believe me," she whispered. It was barely a sound more breath than speech, but I heard every syllable. Something in my chest went still. Not quiet. Still. Still the way a lake goes before a storm rips through it. I stood, slowly turned to the corporal. "Who took the initial statement?" He blinked like I had switched languages. "Ma'am, we are following procedure," he began. I held up one hand not to silence him rudely, but to stop a script I had heard before. "I have been military longer than that clipboard has existed, Corporal. You are going to listen now." He straightened instinctively. The private from the front desk approached, sensing tension. Brain, ever the opportunist, lifted his hands slightly. "Laura, let them do their job. We do not need to make a scene." The way he said scene made my jaw tighten. A scene is a tantrum. A scene is theatrics. This was not theater. This was my child's life, and I knew the danger of letting someone like him frame the narrative. I turned to the MPs. "I would like the supervising NCO." My tone was flat steel. No raise in volume, just authority laid plain. Command presence is not always loud. Sometimes it simply refuses to bend. The private hesitated, looked at the corporal, then moved. Moments later, a staff sergeant appeared, older eyes carrying the alertness of someone who had seen enough midnights to know normal from not normal. "SSG Hayes," she said, recognizing my rank, nodding respectfully. "What do you need?" "My daughter has visible injuries," I replied. "I want a female MP present for her statement medical evaluation documented immediately, and I want to review the call log and audio clips." Her expression shifted. Respect turned into understanding. Procedure lined up behind her eyes. "Yes, ma'am. Right away." Brian scoffed. "This is ridiculous." She lunged at me. I defended myself. "Ask her. Ask her yourself." Maddie flinched. My hand hovered near her shoulder, not touching, offering space to choose. She leaned slightly toward me. "Not much. Enough." I looked at Brian finally. Years of trying to build trust flashed through my mind, followed by every unanswered instinct, every forced smile Maddie had given him, every too-sweet tone she used when he entered a room. My voice came out quiet. "You will sit over there?" That was not a suggestion. It was command written without shouting. Brian started to argue, but the staff sergeant gestured. "Sir, take a seat. Now." Authority shifted like weight, redistributing on a bridge subtle but irreversible. Brian walked away stiffly. Officers repositioned. Maddie exhaled like she had been holding air for a week. I knelt again beside her, close, but not crowding. "Did he hurt you?" I asked softly. She nodded once, a tiny movement, eyes filling but not spilling. Did you touch him first? She shook her head, slow, miserable, terrified. I nodded. That was enough for now. The staff sergeant returned with a female MP who approached gently crouched to eye level with Maddie. "Let's step into a private room," she said. "Get you checked out." Maddie stood legs shaky. She looked at me. "I will be right here," I told her. "You are not alone in this." She nodded and followed the MP. The moment the door closed behind them, the room shifted. It was like everyone suddenly realized I was not only a mother, but also someone who knew how this system worked, someone who understood rank and rights and the power of persistence. Brian sat stiffly, jaw-clenching eyes darting between officers in the hallway. I could feel his narrative slipping from his hands. He knew it too. The private at the desk avoided my gaze now. The corporal stood straighter, recognizing that this was not another domestic spat to be processed and filed away. It was a moment with consequences, a turning point. One officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, do you want to give a statement while we wait?" "Yes, but let me be clear. If anyone implied my daughter instigated before hearing her review your training manuals again. Defensive, calm, controlled flame. I had worn many titles in my career. Soldier, NCO, trainer. That night I wore one more. Mother who would dismantle every assumption brick by brick until the truth had room to breathe. If your child ever whispered that no one would believe them and you saw doubt in the eyes of those who should protect, tell me in the comments what you would do. Evidence does not always arrive like a hammer. Sometimes it comes like a whisper. First, then a crack in a veneer, then a flood so undeniable it pulls the truth into the light, whether anyone is ready for it or not. I sat in that fluorescent hallway with my hands clasped, elbows on my knees, breathing slow the way they teach you before live fire drills, except this was not about aim. This was about patience and fury, learning how to coexist without breaking me open in front of uniformed witnesses. A door down the hall opened. An MP specialist stepped out holding a tablet, brows pulled tight. She walked toward the staff sergeant and spoke quietly, but not quietly enough for me to miss the words. Audio file. Timestamp matches call. Found on the daughter's phone. Accidentally recorded. Something in my chest lifted and tightened at once. Maddie must have started recording in panic, not even knowing she did it. A digital reflex born from fear. The staff sergeant nodded, gestured to an office. They disappeared inside. A few minutes later, another MP exited a room and approached Brian. "Sir, we need clarification on your timeline." Brian puffed with offense. "I already told you. She attacked me." "Are you slow?" The corporal stiffened but did not respond. I did. My voice carried that controlled quiet that makes people freeze. "Watch your tone. That soldier wears a uniform you never earned." Brian turned toward me, eyes narrowing, but before he could speak, the office door opened. The staff sergeant now held the tablet in her hand like it weighed more than glass and metal normally should. Her jaw was set not in anger, but in certainty. She addressed the room. "We have audio." The casual posture of the younger MPs vanished. Even Brian straightened, though his expression flickered. That flutter of panic in someone who thought he held the story and just felt it slip. The staff sergeant tapped the screen. A sound crackled through the small speakers. A breath. A muffled sob. Then Maddie's voice shaking, pleading, saying, "Please stop. I did not do anything. Let go of me." Then heavier footsteps, a thud, something clattering across a hard surface. A man's voice followed sharp and low, the kind of tone used by people who want power without witnesses. "Crying will not help you. You want to act grown. You take consequences like one." My fingers dug into the chair arms. Rage rose like heat off asphalt in summer. I did not move. I did not blink. I listened. Then Maddie's voice again breaking, "Please stop." Then another sound impact and breath knocked from lungs. Then silence except faint static. When it ended, the air in the station felt like glass. No one moved. No one coughed. The world held its breath. The corporal swallowed. The private's face went pale. The staff sergeant looked at Brian. Her tone had no softness left. "Sir, you need to take a seat." Brian's face changed fast, too, fast composure fracturing like ice under weight. He scoffed, laughed under his breath, shook his head. Audio can be fake. Kids manipulate things these days. Phones glitch. Her voice shook. He looked at me, searching for support he no longer had. Laura, tell them. Tell them she can get emotional. I stared at him, and in that moment, the distance between who I once hoped he was and who he truly was stretched like a chasm. I did not speak. I did not need to. The staff sergeant continued. We also have a neighbor statement from housing. Caller reports seeing the daughter run barefoot into hallway crying approximately 20 minutes before MPs arrived. Brian opened his mouth, but she held up a hand. There is more. Security camera footage from the building entrance. Shows daughter leaving unit in distress. Shows you following moments later. Brian's facade cracked like cheap glass. His eyes darted, mouth tightening, jaw flexing. He dropped the calm dad act. Voice raised. This is blown out of proportion. She pushed me. She was hysterical. I was trying to restrain her. Anyone would. She is dramatic. Ask her. She will say things when upset. That last line landed like poison on tile. I stood then. Not fast, controlled, deliberate. I walked toward him, not close enough to cross boundaries, but close enough so he could see exactly who he had underestimated. I spoke quietly, but every syllable was a verdict. She ran barefoot, crying while you followed. She begged you to stop. I heard it. They heard it. Everyone here will hear it. His face contorted, that thin mask of civility twisting into frustration. He tried to step toward me, but 2 MPs shifted subtly, blocking him without touching him. The staff sergeant nodded at the corporal. Begin paperwork for detainment pending full CID review. The corporal moved instantly. Brian's mouth opened and closed like he was searching for oxygen in a room suddenly too bright, too honest. He tried one last tactic, turning to the female MP returning from examining Maddie. You know teenagers lie. You know how they can be. She stared at him, expression steady. I know what bruises look like when they are not accidents. His face reddened, voice cracked. I am the victim here. I have rights. I am the adult. I spoke before anyone else could. Yes, you are the adult, and that is why this is worse. The staff sergeant nodded once. That was enough. Officers moved. Brian sputtered, pulled out his phone like it were a shield thumb shaking. He pointed at me. This is your fault. You turned her against me. You put military garbage in her head. You think anyone will believe you over me. I held his stare. They do. They will. The corporal guided him back. I watched his face. Real fear emerged raw and exposed, not the fear of danger, but the fear of losing control over a narrative he thought belonged to him. Vindication did not hit loud. It hit quiet, like a door clicking shut on a chapter I never wanted to write. Maddie emerged from the hallway, then eyes red, cheeks damp, blanket around her shoulders. She saw Brian surrounded by MPs, saw his composure gone, saw him argue and flail and snap. She did not smile. She did not crumble. She just breathed, and her breath did not shake this time. I walked to her. She leaned against me, not collapsing, just resting, a tired weight of someone who finally stopped holding herself up alone. I put a steady hand between her shoulder blades, anchoring silent assurance. Officers continued processing radios, murmuring pens, scratching forms, but in that moment, none of it mattered more than the truth standing visible in harsh fluorescent light. The world had tried to doubt her. He had tried to rewrite her pain, but the evidence did not whisper tonight. It spoke, and once spoken, it could not be unsaid. There are victories that roar and victories that hum low like a heartbeat returning after shock. This one hummed. If your child ever fought to be believed and someone tried to twist their truth into doubt, tell me what that would spark in you. Once truth breaks surface in a military setting, it does not drift. It moves with force like a current under steel gates. The moment the staff sergeant radioed up the chain, the tone inside that building shifted. Procedure snapped into alignment the way boots fall into step after a cadence call sharp enough to wake instinct. 2 CID agents arrived within minutes, plain clothes, but unmistakable, the kind of bearing you cannot fake quiet, but watchful. One carried a slim case, the other a tablet and a legal pad. They spoke with low voices and purposeful steps, scanning the scene, taking in details without theatrics. This was not just a domestic disturbance anymore. It was now evidence, testimony, accountability. I watched them confer with the staff sergeant, their faces neither shocked nor casual, simply focused like they had walked into this kind of truth before and learned how to handle it without flinching or gloating. Justice in uniform does not raise its voice. It organizes documents and moves. The younger MPs retreated, suddenly aware that this had become bigger than their initial assumptions. Brian, now seated in a holding area with wrists secured, tried to speak up, tried to recreate the authority he once wielded in our kitchen or car, but CID did not even look at him. His voice became background noise, stripped of power by the weight of a system finally watching him instead of believing him. Then JAG was called. I heard the name spoken quietly between agents. Not a threat, a formality, a signal that this was not going to be lost in reports or shrugged off as emotional misunderstanding. Legal eyes would be on this. Military legal eyes. As much as I despise what led us there, something inside me steadied. The system that trains us to protect and serve, to carry values in our pockets, like dog tags, was now moving on behalf of my child. I did not breathe easier, but I breathed deeper. When CID turned toward me, I stood. Reflex, respect. The taller one hair-cropped, tight voice, even as a level, nodded. Staff Sergeant Hayes, we are initiating a protective removal from base housing. Standard protocol under suspected harm to a dependent. I nodded. Understood. Thank you. My voice did not match how I felt. Inside me, two selves battled. The soldier grateful for swift responses. The mother trying not to collapse under the sight of her daughter wrapped in a blanket like a fragile thing when she used to wrap herself in courage and laughter and stubborn pride. Maddie leaned into my shoulder slightly, exhaustion replacing fear. One agent turned to the female MP. Have escort arranged to Womack ER. Full medical evaluation photos, written statement, chain of custody. The language was clinical practiced. My heart clenched anyway. ER, evaluation, photos. Words no mother ever once associated with her child. Yet those words meant proof, protection, future safety. I placed my hand gently on Maddie's back. We are going now, I whispered. She nodded, eyes glassy, throat tight from holding emotions too heavy for someone barely out of girlhood. As we walked out, Brian called out, voice rough. This is insane! You cannot just drag her into tests and reports like she is a victim. She knows what she did. You are brainwashing her. The female MP turned stance firm, but I beat her to speaking. My voice stayed low, steady. No one brainwashed her. You just lost the room because the truth finally spoke louder than you. His face twisted. Fear, anger, confusion, but no power left to wield. The automatic doors slid open, letting in cold October air. It hit my face like reality waking me again. Outside, post lights glowed across quiet roads, the kind only military bases know, before sunrise, orderly and unmoving against chaos most civilians never see. A patrol car idled. The female MP gestured. This way, ma'am. Maddie and I climbed in the back, not in custody, but in protection. I pulled her close. Her body trembled from adrenaline drop exhaustion and something deeper like grief for a safety she once believed in. The ride to Womack Army Medical Center passed in silence except for radio chatter. I stared out the window at familiar buildings, the motor pool, the chapel where we once attended a holiday service, the commissary parking lot where Maddie and I argued playfully about snacks, and she once made me laugh so hard I almost dropped a gallon of milk. That normal life slid through my mind like a film reel from a different year. At the ER entrance, bright hospital lights washed over us. The MP helped open the door, respectful, careful. Inside, the nurse at the desk took one look at Maddie's face and called for a trauma room without hesitation. No questions like, "Are you sure?" Just action. In the exam bay, fluorescent lights stung my eyes. They always do when exhaustion and emotion collide. Nurses moved with efficient compassion. A doctor in scrubs glasses dangling from a chain approached with calm gravity. She spoke to Maddie first, not to me. That mattered. It meant she saw Maddie not as an extension of me or a dependent, but as a person with her own story. "We are going to take photos," she said gently. "It is part of documentation. Then we will check for injuries." Maddie nodded. Tears welled again, but did not fall. Strength is sometimes the refusal to fall apart, even when the world has shown you every reason to crumble. I stood at the edge of the room, hands clasped behind my back out of habit. Years of military bearing do not fade just because your heart is breaking. But my hands shook. Not visibly, not dramatically, just enough to betray the war inside me. Rage and grief, pride and devastation, helplessness and control. I wanted to hold her. I also wanted to give her space to reclaim her autonomy to speak for herself after months of being silenced in her own house. A nurse placed a warm blanket over her. Maddie whispered, "Thank you." Her voice sounded small but real, like she was slowly reclaiming her own volume. CID agents entered with a clipboard stood respectfully near the curtain. "Ma'am, when she is ready, we will collect her statement. No rush. Take your time." The way he said "ready, not now" mattered. Empathy inside procedure. The two halves of the system I have served so long meeting my daughter where she stood. While they waited, the curtain closed partially, leaving me in a sliver of hallway. My shoulders slumped for the first time that night. I pressed my palm briefly to the cool wall, grounding myself. Soldiers learn to compartmentalize. Mothers learn to feel. Tonight, both demanded space. A nurse glanced at me, perhaps recognizing that dual battle. She offered a quiet nod that said, "You are doing what you can." When the doctor re-emerged, she had a clipboard and a serious expression. "Nothing life-threatening," she said, "but bruising patterns consistent with force. Older marks visible too. Likely previous incidents." The words ripped through me gently but mercilessly. Previous incidents. I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. The room behind the curtain hummed. Machines. Soft voices. Maddie answering questions. My daughter was speaking. Being heard. Safety had not arrived fully, but danger had been named. The system was awake, and so was I. There is a strange quiet that comes when justice begins. Not triumph, not relief. A quiet like dawn, soft and stern at once. That night, I stood in that quiet mother and soldier side by side and held on as the truth finally found its footing. Hospitals at 4 a.m. do not feel like life or death stages the way movies pretend. They feel suspended, like the air is holding its breath along with everyone inside. Soft beeps rolling carts, low voices moving through white corridors. Womack's hallways always smelled faintly of antiseptic and floor wax, a familiar scent from immunizations and sprained ankles and deployment physicals. I never imagined I would associate it with my daughter's quiet, shaking shoulders. After initial exams, they moved Maddie to a small observation room, curtain half drawn. Lighting soft enough to be gentle, hard enough to see every bruise. A nurse finished documenting external injuries with a digital camera. Every click sounded like a pin dropping. Maddie kept her face turned slightly away, but she did not flinch. That almost hurt more than if she had. Resignation in someone so young feels like watching daylight go out early. A doctor stepped back in female, maybe mid-50s gray, woven through her hair, the kind of presence that carried both firmness and compassion. She reviewed the monitor, then gently reached toward Maddie's arm. "May I?" Maddie nodded. The doctor examined finger-shaped discolorations near her bicep. Another faint shadow on her rib cage where old bruises were fading to that sickly yellow that time gives wounds instead of apology. She murmured quietly to the nurse, marking each area clinical but not detached. She caught my eye once, and in her expression I saw no shock. Instead, I saw certainty forged from years of seeing things families wish were not true. When she finished, she sat on the stool beside Maddie, speaking softly. Voice like warm cloth. "Some of these patterns are recent, some older. Does that match what you experienced?" Maddie stared at her hands. Jaw working. Not dramatic. Just tight. She nodded. "Yes." The doctor waited, giving space. Maddie exhaled like air had weight. "It started small," she whispered. "He would grab my wrist when he was upset. or hold my arm too tight if I tried to walk away. I thought it was stress. Then he pushed me once. Not hard, but enough. My throat tightened. Maddie continued, voice thin. He would say I disrespected him, that I made things difficult. He said Mom had enough on her plate, that I should not cause trouble. Tears rose but did not fall. She stared at the sterile wall like she was trying to see the memory instead of relive it. I tried to be good. I tried to stay quiet. He said if I talked, you would think I was dramatic. My knees almost buckled. I grabbed the back of the nearby chair, grounding myself. The doctor nodded gently. And tonight, Maddie swallowed. He cornered me in the kitchen, said I provoked him by leaving dishes, said I rolled my eyes. I told him to stop touching me. I tried to go outside. He grabbed me. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. When I pulled away, he slammed my face into the counter. 3 times. A small sound escaped her throat. Not loud. Not a sob. A sound like the body remembering impact. I closed my eyes once tight. A burn crawled up my chest like grief and fury had fused. The doctor's voice remained calm. You did nothing to deserve that. Maddie shook her head, but her shoulders curled inward, shame unearned sitting in her posture. I stepped closer, not too fast. I placed my hand lightly on her shoulder. She did not flinch this time. That alone made my heart twist. She looked up at me, then eyes watery but determined. I thought if I told you would be disappointed. I blinked. Why? Because you are strong. You face everything. I did not want to make you worry or think I could not handle my life. My mouth opened, but no words came. She misread my silence, lowered her gaze. I am sorry. Something inside me cracked quietly. Not a shatter, a soft tear down the center. Sorry. She apologized for surviving. She apologized for being hurt. I knelt in front of her hand, still on her shoulder, voice raw but steady. You never have to apologize for needing safety. Ever. Her face crumpled and she covered her mouth, not because she wanted to hide, but because she had been holding herself together so long that letting go felt unfamiliar. Tears slipped through her fingers, silent, steady. No sobbing. No dramatic collapse. Just quiet grief, the kind that comes from too many days pretending nothing was wrong. I stayed kneeling back stiff, breathing slow, to keep myself from shaking too visibly. Years of military discipline collided with motherhood, and neither could protect me from the ache tearing through my rib cage. The doctor squeezed Maddie's hand, gently, murmured something about trauma specialists, about mandatory reporting, about being safe now. I heard the words, but they swam around me like distant radio chatter. Then she stepped out and a different professional entered. Civilian clothes badge clipped to belt, therapist or social worker. She pulled up a chair, notepad closed, no pen. She did not ask questions right away. She simply sat. Stillness can be mercy. Maddie wiped her cheeks slowly. The woman spoke softly. You do not have to say anything yet. You just breathe. We are here. Maddie nodded. I sat back in the chair beside her, elbows on knees, fingertips pressed to my lips. My body felt like stone and fire at the same time. The therapist glanced at me, her voice gentle but firm. I know you have carried a lot alone. The job, the family, the expectations. But you are not alone in this part. I looked at her. She did not flinch. Strength recognizes strength. Sometimes it comes wrapped in softness. My throat tightened. I nodded once. Maddie leaned against me, head on my shoulder, subtle and hesitant, like she was checking if this space was safe for weight again. It was. I let my cheek rest against the top of her head, eyes closed, no noise. No sobbing, just silent tears that traced down without drama. My hand shook once before I steadied it. Quiet crying hit harder than any scream. The therapist placed a box of tissues beside us but did not reach for one. She let us sit in that quiet rupture. Time moved in small breaths. My mind flickered through years. First day of kindergarten, her middle school choir concert, her 18th birthday when she laughed at the cake frosting on my face. All of it collided with this moment. I felt the weight of every time she had hugged me a little tighter when saying goodbye before training rotations. She had been asking for safety without knowing how to say it. I had missed it. Later, I would learn I had not failed her, that abusers build silence like walls around their victims, but in that second my chest filled with guilt sharp enough to cut. The therapist's voice anchored me. Guilt means you love her. It does not mean you caused this. I exhaled shakily. Maddie's spoke then voice barely above a whisper. I kept thinking it would get better, that if I tried harder, he would stop. The therapist nodded once. Survivors often try to earn peace, but peace is never something you should have to earn in your own home. Maddie pressed her forehead against my arm. I put an arm around her, protective, gentle, not gripping, just holding like she was made of breath and memory. We sat there together, three women, in a small hospital room, dawn still hours away, truth finally spoken. The world still heavy but no longer silent. I breathed in the clean hospital air, the antiseptic sting, the soft hum of machines, and I let the tears fall quietly. Strong does not mean unbreakable. It means you hold on when the shaking comes. And in that room, we held on. News on a military post does not spread fast because people gossip. It spreads fast because communities built on trust and chain of command do not tolerate uncertainty for long. Rumor is a threat to order. Truth is currency. And when the truth cuts through fog, it arrives like a bugle call at dawn, clear and unmistakable. By the end of the week, Maddie and I were living in temporary on-post lodging. CID had barred Brian from base housing. His contractor badge was suspended pending outcome. Military protocol moved like gears clicking into place. Not emotional, just precise. But while the Army handled structure, Brian handled something far smaller. He went online. On a quiet Thursday morning, while Maddie and I sat at a small kitchenette table eating scrambled eggs she barely tasted, a notification buzzed on my phone. Then another, and another. A fellow NCO texted, "You seen Facebook? He is talking." My stomach tightened. I opened my app. Brian had posted on a local spouse's Facebook group, a place meant for potluck signups, housing tips, lost dog notices, bake sales. Not battlegrounds. His message was long filled with wounded phrasing, implying that I had created drama, that Maddie had emotional episodes, that I used military intimidation, that our home had been peaceful until she snapped. He wrote as if he were the victim of a soldier with a temper and a teenager who acted out to get attention. He never used my name, but he used enough detail that anyone who lived near our street understood who he meant. Hundreds of eyes read his version before breakfast. He counted on sympathy, on people believing a composed civilian man over a tired female NCO and a teenage girl. He counted wrong. Because posts do not live in vacuums on bases. They live in communities where soldiers and families see each other's sacrifices up close. They watch us deploy. They watch us return changed. They watch our kids hug us at ceremonies with tears in their eyes. People remember character here. My pulse steadied into something cold and still. Controlled fury, not loud, not wild, but sharp enough to cut through noise. Maddie looked at me nervously, as if expecting the world to turn against her again. I placed my hand on hers. "We face it," I said. Together. That afternoon was the Fort Liberty Family Readiness Town Hall, a quarterly briefing where leadership meets with families, answers questions, reviews safety and community policies. It was already on the schedule before any of this happened. Fate has strange timing. I did not intend to attend. But by midday, CID reached out. Commander requested presence. Clarifications to be made, they said. That was all. We sat in the auditorium, second row. Maddie by my side, quiet but upright eyes, tired but focused. Soldiers, spouses, teens, retirees filled the seats. Folding chairs rustled. Murmurs swirled. The stage held a podium unit banners and the post commander, a calm man with silver at his temples and a voice like gravel and fairness. He spoke on training cycles, holiday schedules, commissary updates. My heart pounded like distant marching drums. When he shifted to family safety programs, his tone changed lower, heavier. "We had an incident on post housing this week involving harm to a dependent." Silence rolled through the room like a wave. He did not say names. He did not need to. He continued. "I want to be clear. The system acted swiftly. Military police responded. CID intervened. Medical staff documented. Protective orders issued. The dependent is safe. The service member acted appropriately and with restraint. Murmurs stirred, heads turned, eyes landed on me. A flicker of heat rose in my cheeks, but I kept my posture straight. Soldiers do not shrink, mothers do not hide, not when truth stands behind them, the commander went on. I am aware of online commentary attempting to misrepresent the situation. Let me make this clear: misinformation harms families and undermines trust. That stops now. His voice did not shout. It did not need to. Authority spoken without anger carries farther. He lifted a folder. Inside were documents stamped "Official Undeniable." The police report, wiped of identifying details, but visible enough that anyone reading could see who had been harmed and who had been removed. He placed it on the podium. This installation stands with victims, not with abusers. The applause started small from a cluster of senior spouses, then grew rolling through the room like boots hitting pavement in unison. Maddie's breath shook. Her hand slipped into mine. When the clapping faded, the commander added, "If you see false narratives online, disengage. We support facts here. We support safety and respect." He paused. "And for any family going through something quietly, reach out. You are not alone. You never face the dark corners alone on this post." The crowd nodded, some eyes misting. The patriotism in that room was not about flags and anthems. It was about community and protection and what it means to live inside a system built on duty. After the meeting, people approached, quietly, respectfully. A senior spouse squeezed my arm. "Proud of you." Another murmured, "We believe her." A young private's wife whispered, "If you or she need meals, we have volunteers. We take care of our own." Maddie stood straighter, shoulders loosening as if the weight of disbelief finally lifted. Then, as we walked to the parking lot, I saw him, Brian, standing across the street by the visitor center, unable to step foot on post, now watching. His face tight, jaw clenched, arms crossed like a child denied a toy. He had expected sympathy. He had expected doubt to work like it had at home. But tonight, the base witnessed the truth. He was not center of the story. He was the cautionary tale. For one moment, our eyes met across the gate line. Not anger, not triumph, just recognition. He no longer held power here. He turned and walked away, shoulders hunched, posture small. Maddie exhaled a breath she had held for months. The sound was soft but full release, relief, rebirth. "You do not need to fight alone anymore," I told her. "You are heard." She nodded. The flag on the pole near the headquarters building rustled in the breeze, catching evening light. For a second, I felt something unusual, not victory, not vengeance, but dignity returned. Justice in quiet form, not retribution with fists or fury, but truth standing taller than lies. Some winds do not roar. They resonate. They settle into bones. They stay. On military ground under a flag we defend with our lives, my daughter reclaimed her voice. And I stood beside her not as a soldier commanding a field, but as a mother who refused to let fear rewrite her child's story. If you were in that room and your family's truth was finally honored in public, what would that moment mean to you? It always happens after accountability. When the noise dies down, when truth settles like dust finding its resting place. That is when the audacity shows up. Entitled men do not disappear quietly. They circle back, convinced control is a door they can knock on again. 3 days after the town hall, I opened my inbox and saw his name. Subject line: "We should talk." My chest tightened, not with fear that part of him no longer lived in me, but with a deep tiredness. I clicked. The message was long, rambling, dressed in the tone abusers love to wear when consequences finally find them. He wrote that Maddie misremembered events under emotional stress. He wrote that I was letting military culture turn a family disagreement into a battlefield. He wrote that he forgave us and wanted to rebuild. Forgave. The word sat in my throat like bitter chalk. This man had shattered trust, bruised a girl's face, cornered her in her kitchen, and stood ready to watch her be blamed for it. And now he extended forgiveness as if it were a gift. At the end, he added one line: "Let's meet off post. Talk this through like adults. If not for us, for her. For her." The same girl he silenced with threats. The same one who shook in a hospital bed while doctors traced fading violence along her ribs. I did not reply. Some invitations are not meant to be dignified with response. I closed the laptop and breathed in slowly, letting the breath settle behind my sternum like armor sliding into place. Maddie sat across the room, headphones in, drawing in her notebook. Her face was calmer now, healing but aware. I did not tell her about the email. She did not need to give that man another inch of space in her mind. I thought that would be the end of it. It never is. 2 mornings later, as I drove toward the main gate, a security patrol signaled me aside before I even reached the ID checkpoint. The guard leaned down, voice low. "Ma'am, you might want to park and step aside a moment. Someone is trying to make contact with you." My pulse did not quicken. I knew before I saw him. There he stood beyond the concrete barriers, civilian clothes, backpack slung over one shoulder, as if he were an inconvenienced commuter, not a barred individual desperate to rewrite a narrative he no longer controlled. He waved when he spotted me. My jaw clenched. The gate guard's hand hovered near his radio, respectful but ready. Brian called out across the barrier, voice too loud, straining for normalcy. "We need to talk." She lied, and you know it. I shook my head slowly. The calm in me did not feel fragile. It felt earned, forged. I stepped close enough that my voice carried, but not close enough to cross the invisible boundary I had built long before the Army made it official. "There is nothing left to discuss." His face twisted. Anger bubbled. Desperation flickered. He tried a new tactic. "She needs a father." I laughed, once short and humorless. The kind of sound born when disbelief meets disgust. "A father protects. You were a threat." His jaw tightened. "You will regret alienating me." My tone did not rise. It sharpened. "The only thing you will ever see from us again is a legal notice." His mouth opened as if to argue, but the gate guard stepped forward. "Sir, you need to leave the post perimeter. Immediately." Brian tried to protest, launching into the same false calm he once used to manipulate, but authority does not negotiate with ego. 2 more guards approached. Their presence was quiet, firm, and final. He backed up, stumbling once, then turned and walked fast toward the parking lot. No swagger left. No control. Just retreat. When he reached his car, he slammed the door so hard the window shook, then sped off with a squeal that made heads turn but changed nothing. The gate returned to normal. Cars rolled through. Soldiers showed IDs. Life kept moving. I stood still for one more breath, the autumn wind lifting a strand of hair at my temple. The guard met my eye. "You okay, ma'am?" I nodded. "Yes." And I meant it, because strength is not measured by how loudly you fight. Sometimes it is measured by how quietly you refuse to open the door again. Justice had already spoken. The world did not need to hear another word from him. Neither did we. Legal processes are not glamorous. They do not feel like triumph in the moment. They feel like paperwork appointments, signatures, long chairs in courthouse corridors, and quiet breath held between decisions. But they are the slow machinery of accountability, and once they begin rolling, they rarely roll backward. The Monday after he appeared at the gate, we were already scheduled in district court. No delays, no excuses. The Army might move at the speed of orders, but civilian law moves at the speed of paperwork and pressure. And in this case, the pressure was undeniable. In North Carolina, domestic protective orders can be temporary at first. Emergency, automatic based on credible threat. The judge read the police report, then the medical documentation, then the consultation notes from Womack. He did not look surprised. Judges in military communities see more than their share of families pulled tight between service and stress and unexpected violence. He raised his eyes to me. "You and your daughter are requesting a full DVPO." "Yes, Your Honor." Maddie spoke softly but clearly. "Yes, sir." Her voice did not tremble. It did not need to. Truth carries its own spine once it is spoken enough times. The judge nodded. "The evidence is sufficient. Full order granted. 1 year minimum. Renewal available without further burden of proof if you request it." Brian's attorney, a man who looked like he charged by the hour in exasperated sighs, attempted a protest. "Your Honor, my client!" The judge cut him off with a single raised hand. "The state and military investigators agree on the threat level. We will not be revisiting that today." The gavel struck once, sharp, Clean. Protective order, permanent address restrictions. No contact. No social media messages. No third-party communication attempts. Violate it and he would face arrest. Outside the courtroom, Maddie exhaled slowly like she had been holding air since the night everything cracked open. That was just the beginning, because consequences stack. First came the notification from the contracting firm where Brian worked. His badge had already been suspended pending investigation. Now it was revoked permanently. Loss of base access, loss of job. No quiet reinstatement, no misunderstanding narrative. A formal letter arrived stating violation of conduct clauses and safety protocols. He would not be working near service members or their families again. Then came the civilian charges: assault on a minor, false police report, interfering with emergency communication. His court dates stacked like bricks. His lawyer negotiated. Plea discussions began. He tried to frame his actions as stress response. He requested leniency. The state did not offer much. He accepted a plea deal: probation, mandatory counseling, anger management, no contact enforcement. No jail this time, not because he deserved freedom, but because evidence supported structured monitoring instead of incarceration. That frustrated a part of me, a deep, fierce part that wanted iron bars and a cold mattress to remind him each night of what he did. But another part, the one that has seen justice from more than one angle in my career, understood something. Quieter freedom under restrictions can feel like humiliation, not grace. Shame can choke louder than chains. And he would be watched, closely. The probation supervisor assigned to him was ex-military law enforcement, a man who read case files the way some men read maps looking for terrain patterns, places people slip. Brian would have to report weekly, submit to evaluations, complete domestic violence intervention programs designed not for optics but for accountability. If he failed even once, violations would send him to county jail without renegotiation. Public record, public accountability. No quiet corner to hide in. He tried to appeal one clause, the one restricting online contact, claimed it was excessive. The judge reviewed the Facebook posts, then reimposed the restriction with firmer language. On-post whispers stopped. Not whispered gossip, but whispered relief. The kind that travels through FRG groups and hallway nods and commissary aisles. People knew, people supported. One afternoon after PT, a fellow NCO stopped me outside the gym. Heard what happened. If you ever need anything, errands, watch meals, anything, just say the word. Not pity, respect. Another day, a chaplain slipped a card into my hand. No speech, just a scripture passage and printed number for counseling services. Soldiers understand silent endurance. They also understand fracture and rebuild. Around that time, the legal office emailed me a scanned notice. Public record of his guilty plea. Domestic violence intervention enrollment. 24 months supervised probation. Completion of program required before termination considered. That document went into a file in my kitchen drawer. Not because I needed to look at it, because one day Maddie might, and she would not wonder if justice came. She would see it. Paper is not triumph, but it is proof. At base headquarters, one more administrative action took place, quiet but final. His installation access file updated. Denied, indefinite. I signed acknowledgement as sponsor. It felt like closing a gate with steel, not wood. Maddie did not attend that appointment. She was at therapy, healing, reclaiming. When I picked her up afterward, she asked almost casually, "Did they finish it?" "Yes." She looked out the window as we drove past the parade field. Soldiers marched in formation, cadence echoing across grass, turning gold in autumn sun. She whispered more to herself than me. "He cannot reach us anymore." "No," I said, "he cannot." In towns, off-post news of court outcomes slips quietly into clerks' computers and case logs. In military towns, it goes into another record too. Memory, not for gossip, for awareness, for protection, for culture shift. One evening in the commissary, I saw him. Not close. At a distance on the other side of the fence where civilians line up for visitor passes. Badge gone. Face tired. Shoulders hunched like a man who once built identity on control and now carried only consequence. He looked at me. I did not look away. I did not glare. I did not smirk. I simply stood there, steady hand on Maddie's back as she compared cereal boxes unaware. Justice did not roar. It existed. And sometimes existing is enough. The world had told him no. Firmly. Publicly. Permanently. He lost access to the space he used to walk freely. He lost the audience he expected sympathy from. He lost the illusion that intimidation works when truth stands tall. That was justice, not revenge. Justice. Masonry built from accountability and paper and steady voices instead of fists. People often think justice feels like celebration. Sometimes it feels like quiet breathing again. Clean, controlled, safe. And that was enough. Healing does not arrive like a trumpet blast. It comes like autumn light, slow and golden, touching edges first before it warms the center. After the court rulings after base access was revoked after the dust of procedure settled into routine life did not snap back. It exhaled, and we learned how to breathe inside it again. Maddie started weekly therapy at the Family Advocacy Clinic. The first day, she walked in quiet posture, tucked inward like she was bracing for impact. She walked out different, not lighter yet, but anchored. That became our rhythm. Tuesday afternoons therapy, then hot chocolate from the little cafe near the PX where retirees sit in ball caps embroidered with wars they carry in muscle memory. No dramatic shifts, just small truths learned week by week. Some days she spoke for an hour. Some days she sat in silence, turning her bracelet around her wrist. Both were progress. I adjusted my schedule, trading high-tempo assignments for more administrative duty. No one questioned it. Soldiers know when one of their own is fighting a different battle. My platoon sergeant simply nodded and said, "Ma'am, family first. We got you." Support does not always come as speeches. Sometimes it comes as paperwork handled quietly and shifts covered without a word. Evenings became gentle again. We cooked simple meals, chicken pasta, roasted vegetables, nothing fancy, just warm food in warm light. We washed dishes side by side. Window cracked open to let crisp October air roll through, smelling faintly of pine and distant bonfires. Some nights we said little. Content silence. Once I found Maddie sitting on the porch swing with a fleece blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching leaves fall like slow confetti. I sat beside her, no questions asked. She leaned her head against my shoulder. We stayed there until the sky faded from amber to navy and the first star blinked awake. No tears. No speeches. Just belonging returning to its proper place. The base community held us softly. A family readiness volunteer dropped off a casserole one evening without knocking. A neighbor left pumpkin bread on our stoop. A chaplain walked past during PT one morning and simply touched the brim of his cap in acknowledgement. Support here is often wordless, but it is solid as a flagpole planted in bedrock. Maddie found small joys again. She baked cinnamon cookies that made the house smell like school fairs and childhood. She organized my bookshelf in color order, declaring it therapeutic chaos control. She painted a small canvas of field under a sunrise and hung it above her desk. She started journaling. Long paragraphs, some nights one single sentence others. Today I felt safe, or I laughed without thinking first. Healing is not linear, but those sentences mattered more than any milestone. Weekend mornings became slow rituals. Pancakes, extra syrup, newspaper spread across the table, even though we mainly skimmed headlines. Music low, Fleetwood Mac, Simon and Garfunkel, Patsy Cline, voices older than both of us, but made for mornings when hearts knit themselves quietly. I cleaned my Class A uniform one afternoon, brushing lint from the fabric smoothing creases. Promotion board was months away, but preparing it felt symbolic, a reminder that I was not defined by crisis either. We live our service in chapters. This one was turning toward light. Maddie noticed. "You look less tired when you're ironing," she joked softly. I smiled. "Straight lines make me feel like the world can be orderly again." She nodded, understanding more than she said. On Sundays, we walked the jogging trail near the lake. Soldiers ran past in formation, sometimes cadence calls echoing across water like echoes of who I had been before and who I would be again. Maddie kicked leaves, hands in pockets, hoodie pulled up on cooler days. Sometimes she talked about college ideas, psychology, social work, maybe art therapy. I never pushed, I just listened. Listening was my new discipline. One evening near Thanksgiving, I found her sitting at the piano in the common room of the lodging facility. She hadn't touched a keyboard in 2 years. Her fingers hesitated, then pressed a soft chord. Imperfect. Honest. She played slowly, haltingly, but the melody grew. Not joyful, yet tender, bruised, hopeful. I stayed in the doorway, tears prickling unseen. When she finished, she whispered to the keys, "I think I'm coming back." That night, we decorated our temporary living room with a string of warm lights. Nothing extravagant, just soft glow tracing the ceiling like an invitation for comfort to stay a while. We sat beneath them, her sketchbook open, my boots unlaced for once by dinner time. Outside, leaves rustled in the wind, and the air carried that distinct southern autumn smell earth wood smoke change. She looked at me, then, eyes steady. "Mom." "Yeah, baby. I don't feel scared all the time anymore." My throat closed. I placed my hand over hers. "You are building something stronger than fear." She squeezed back. "So are you." Healing did not arrive suddenly. It arrived like seasons do, small shifts in air, in color, in how morning light lands on the floor. And as fall deepened into early winter, our lives did not return to what they were. They became something new, softer, steadier, strong. Quiet strength, the kind that does not shout but endures. And with every sunrise, we learned again, survival is not the end. Renewal is. 1 year later, the world did not look different on the surface. The post still woke to cadence calls at sunrise. Flags still rose in morning chill. Boots still thudded against pavement in the steady rhythm of service. But inside our lives, the world had changed shape and strength. Maddie stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her ROTC blouse fingers, nimble brow slightly knit with concentration. The first day always brings nerves. I remembered my own first uniform morning hands shaking not from fear of failure, but from the weight of expectation. She turned to me. "How do I look?" I studied her, shoulders squared, eyes steady, vivid, quiet confidence replacing the shadowed hesitation from a year ago. "You look like you earned it." She smiled, the real kind, soft at first, then warming like sunlight stretching across a room. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I never thought I'd want to wear any kind of uniform," she admitted. I walked over and adjusted her collar slightly. "Service doesn't always start with pride," I said. "Sometimes it starts with survival." She nodded like she felt the truth land in her bones. Outside, the air carried that late summer turning to fall smell, warm earth, cut grass, a hint of crisp wind coming soon. She grabbed her backpack, slung it over her shoulder, then paused. The girl who once whispered fear now stood planning a life built on protection, not escape. She headed to her car, turning once to give me a small salute, half serious, half playful. I returned it with proper form, then laughed as she rolled her eyes and drove off. The screen door creaked behind me as I stepped onto the porch. A new rank rested on my uniform at the cleaner's, Sergeant First Class Hayes. The board results came 6 months ago. I had been in the middle of folding laundry when the text hit. For a moment, I stood frozen, socks in my hands, heart swelling. I did not cry then. I waited until Maddie got home from therapy and handed her the news. She hugged me with pride so fierce it felt like armor. Next week, I would pin on the stripes officially at a small ceremony. Nothing fancy. Service rarely celebrates loudly. We honor quietly through continued duty. I had asked Maddie to place the pin. She agreed instantly, said it was the easiest yes she'd ever given. My new motto had settled into place over the year like scripture memorized in silence. Strength doesn't look like holding it together. Strength is getting help. I'd said it to junior soldiers in my platoon. I'd said it to a young spouse struggling with fear during her husband's deployment. I'd said it to myself on mornings when resilience felt heavy instead of honorable. Healing is not a finish line. It's a practice, like PT, like drill, like faith. On the porch, I sat with my coffee ceramic mug warm against my palms. The American flag on our pole caught a soft breeze, rippling with quiet dignity. Not triumphant. Steadfast. That flag meant something different now. Not blind patriotism. Not duty alone. It meant protection, accountability, Community. It meant I had seen the system stand for my daughter when she needed it, and I had fought beside her, not above her. My phone buzzed a text from her. On campus. Nervous. Excited. I typed back, "You built this life. Be proud." A pause, then her reply. "Thanks for teaching me how to stand up, and for standing up for me first." The porch settled into stillness again. Afternoon cicadas hummed. A neighbor jogged past and waved. A delivery truck rolled down the street slow enough to read mailbox numbers. Life. Ordinary. Beautiful. The kind of quiet you fight to earn. Footsteps approached behind me. Maddie again. She must have forgotten something, but when I turned, she wasn't carrying keys or a textbook. She held nothing but a look, soft, emotional, steady, like the girl she had grown into through fire. Mom. She sat beside me, hands in her lap, fingers laced the way she used to sit at piano recitals. I waited. She took a breath. Mom, thank you for coming for me. The words did not tremble. They landed solid. A year ago, they would have cracked. Now they carried pride instead of pain. I reached over and tucked a loose curl behind her ear like I had when she was 5. I don't leave my own behind. It came out simple. True. She leaned into my shoulder, and we sat there as the flag waved and the breeze shifted light, catching the porch railing like gold dust. Seasons change, but strength stays, not the rigid kind, the kind that bends and breathes and heals. And on that porch, in late afternoon light, we sat not as survivors, but as builders of something stronger than the damage ever was: peace earned, future claimed, home safe. Before I close this chapter, I want to hear from you. Tell me where you're watching from, and if you've ever stood up for someone you love or wished someone had stood up for you, share it in the comments. And if you believe survivors deserve to be heard, believed and protected, let your voice be one of them. To every parent, every service member, every quiet warrior who refuses to leave their own behind, thank you. God bless our families, our communities, and those who serve and protect this nation we call home.